And I've been writing about this subject for years. My previous book was on this subject too, as I sort of traced the rise in particular of this coalition, not only where it came from, but also how it gained power in key states. I have two chapters, one on California, one on New Jersey, which kind of show how this coalition is actually able to take prosperity and upset it and use it for their own kind of interest. And I think people around the country are starting to understand that that's a big issue. So that's essentially what the book is about.
It's definitely interesting because you usually hear that from the left, the argument is all of these programs they're pushing are good for their own sake, not necessarily that it's in their self-interest to try and extort that money from the government.
Well, it's taken the press a very, very long time to understand that there's such a thing as a government interest too. They always think of the interest as being taxpayers, private businesses, but government is its own interest group, and it's always about expanding itself. And certainly now if you look, for instance, at the public sector advocacy groups, for instance, they are the sympathetic part of this coalition because they've always taken the moral high ground. They're the ones who produce all these studies which say we need more government money because we have this problem or this problem. Then we gave them money, and the problem didn't go away, and they issued new studies which say we need more government money. And we've never said, if it's not working, why don't we try something else, or why don't we just stop spending this money? And so what happened is the advocacy groups in particular, they quickly figured out that in order to keep the money flowing to them, they had to get involved in politics. And so they not only became advocates, they not only became active politically at the local level, they started running for office. And the quintessential example of that, of course, is now our president. I mean, even I would never have thought that we would have, by 2008, a former government-funded community activist in the White House. That's how he got his start in politics. And it is a vehicle, a road into politics for people in that sector.
So who are some of the big groups, I guess, doing some of the lobbying of both state governments, obviously, and the federal government to try and get this taxpayer money?
Yes, well, first of all, it actually bubbles up from the local and state to the federal level. And the way it bubbles up is they have tremendous resources now, and the resources are our tax dollars at the state and local level. I'll give you an example. The New Jersey Education Association, their teachers union, they have an annual budget of $98 million. They also send a big chunk of money to the National Education Association. The California Teachers Association, they have 340,000 members, and they have dues that I think are somewhere around $1,000. Do the math. About 20% of that, I believe, actually goes to the national level. So they have tremendous resources at the local level, but because they have so many resources, they are able to also finance state campaigns. And so, to give you an example, the unions, I think the unions in 2008 spent a combined total of, I think it was $180 million on the federal elections. Think about that. If you look at like OpenSecrets.com, which is the campaign finance website, you will see that their list of the big hitters over the last 20 years, you've got 4 or 5 unions in the top 20. And the difference is this, whereas if you look at the businesses or the private associations that are also the big hitters, they tend to divide their money fairly equally between Democrats and Republicans. They're looking for both sides. The union money, 95% of it goes to Democrats. They really are the essence of the Democratic Party these days.
That's what really surprised me about the left's outrage over the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, because the big corporations, like you said, give about 50-50 Democrats and Republicans. They're just in favor of whoever's in power, whereas the public sector unions, yes, they're going 95% to the Democratic Party.
Yes, but let's face it, there is so much hypocrisy about this issue that none of this should surprise us. I mean, what should surprise us is that public sector union members have created in many states, for instance, a pension system that's completely unsustainable. We now have $3 trillion in unfunded future promises, and they actually, as we look at these things, they actually have the nerve to say that it's not their pensions that are wrong, but we should just make all private sector pensions like that. Well, as a country, we would go broke. Believe me, if we could all retire, I mean, the average age that a public school teacher in America retires is like 59 right now. If we could all retire at 59 with 60 to 70% of our salary from the government, which in many states their pensions are not even taxable at the state level. They don't even have to pay taxes on their on their pensions. If we could all retire at that level, it'd be wonderful, but the country would be broke.
So you're saying that on the state level, that's where the public pension problem is really going to overwhelm us.
Yes. And people don't realize the extent to which it is. They hear these big numbers and they understand there's a big problem out there. Right now, the annual contributions that we have to make to sustain those things, well, some states just aren't even bothering to do it. And the contributions are like, they're significant, but they're not what's breaking state budgets right now. But they're increasing rapidly because there's so much out there. If we don't increase our contributions, then the pension funds will go broke. New Jersey's own actuaries said that New Jersey's pension funds could start going broke if nothing changes as soon as 2014 or 15. That's really extraordinary. That doesn't mean just underfunded. That means not enough money left to actually pay people who are retired right now. So it's a real problem. And it's bigger than, we hear the numbers, but we don't really know what that means. But I can tell you what it means. We're going to have to either cut benefits or add money or do both soon.
You've talked a little bit about New Jersey, kind of. Do you see that as a model for how some of the public sector unions have really put the state in a terrible way? And do you see any promising future for tough-talking governors like Chris Christie, who seems to be serious about this issue?
Well, New Jersey and Illinois are both indicative of what the unions have helped to do, because neither of those states has once in the last decade actually earned enough money in tax revenues to pay all their bills. And what they did is they essentially just kept giving out benefits and have never paid for them. They've just used basically long-term accounting to not pay, and that's why you have a pension system that could actually go broke within the next half decade or so. So they unfortunately are the model, because what's dysfunctional about this model is the politicians, in order to get their support, make them promises and then don't worry about paying for them, because they know that the bill will come due in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, maybe when they're not even around.
Yeah.
So they stay in office. It's a dysfunctional system. And what makes it dysfunctional is that with collective bargaining in the public sector, we have essentially given union members, public sector union members, the ability to elect their own bosses. And that just doesn't work. You don't have that in the private sector. Now, Christie has certainly made a lot of headlines, and he is very blunt talking, and people really appreciate that, and he's making headway. But you also have to understand something. Fixing New Jersey is not something you do like this. Because the hole is so deep, it's going to take a while. And he has to walk a tightrope here, because he has to remain popular, because the legislature, which is Democratic, the only reason they're doing even some of the things he wants is because he's popular. He has to remain popular and continue doing things, and it's going to take 3 or 4 years. And people have to understand, this is not like past budget cycles where we balance the budget by cutting a little bit and everything's fine. That this is a long-term project. That's the kind of problem that a place like Jersey or Illinois has gotten itself into.
What do you think of one of the big states obviously in trouble is California, and their new governor, Jerry Brown, well, new and old Governor Jerry Brown, he's talked tough a little bit about this issue. Do you see any promise for any major Democrats facing up to this big problem?
Well, Jerry Brown has talked tough by saying that this is a crisis. And he's done a few things not having to do with public sector unions. He's proposed a few things which I think are good. Problem is, number one, he hasn't really attacked the pension system yet in a way that's sustainable. And they have a huge problem out there, not just with the state, but with their municipalities and their pension systems. In addition to that, what Jerry Brown is basically doing, and he's punting, because they have initiative and referendum out there, he's saying, well, we need to raise all these taxes, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to put it on the ballot, let the voters decide. And essentially what they're saying is that if you don't, he's setting up a situation so that the public sector unions, they're going to advertise, they're going to spend millions of dollars saying, if you don't approve these tax increases, it's going to be the neutron bomb of fiscal wreckage here in the state, and they're going to scare people into thinking, you know, it's either or. Either we raise taxes or the state budget's going to be a mess. Now, this is a state with, you know, an $85 billion general fund and $135 billion in spending in general. They should be able to pay their bills. But Brown is setting up a circumstance where there's going to be really a battle royale in the next election with these initiatives.
So do you see any of this being resolved anytime soon? You said that New Jersey, for example, is a serious problem that's going to take a long time.
Well,
do you see a solution on the horizon?
I see a lot of states doing things to address this. You have a number of states like Minnesota and Colorado last year changed their pension formulas in very good ways. New Jersey has made a bunch of changes, and there are a whole bunch of other legislative changes that are on the agenda this year. You do have in New York State even Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat, I think has so far been more aggressive than Jerry Brown. He's even proposed a property tax cap of 2% in New York State, meaning property taxes can't go up more than 2% every year. I don't know if he's going to get it. If he doesn't get it, then you know, I'll be less inclined to congratulate him. But I give him credit for proposing it. So states are definitely doing things, and they are also cutting spending because they know that the game is over.
Now you're with the Manhattan Institute, and you guys have just launched a new website, kind of focusing a lot on these issues. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, this is really an issue that's not something that's concentrated in Washington, although there are things that Washington can do legislatively. This is really about every state and a lot of cities, and the laws and the rules are all different. So, and we're following all this. So we created a site called publicsectorinc.org, and that's it, publicsectorinc.org, which basically is meant to sort of gather together news in every state and maybe commentary from us about what that means, so that people can sort of get in, first of all, see that there are actually reforms going on around the country. I mean, I've met with public officials who don't even know some of the stuff that other states are contemplating or doing. So this is an attempt to put this stuff together and to understand this is a state and local issue that many states are facing. And so it's kind of like a national problem that's being worked out at the state and local level.
Stephen Malanga, author of the book Shakedown, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.